Welcome to Digital Health Talks. This is Megan Antonelli, CEO of HealthIMPACT Live, and today we are diving into clinical trial innovation with AutoCruitment's Jill Pellegrino. AutoCruitment is a company revolutionizing patient recruitment through AI and digital engagement. Their platform has cut enrollment timelines by 9 months while achieving 97% increase in patient randomizations across 37 countries. Join us as we explore how technology is solving one of healthcare's most persistent challenges, connecting the right patients with life-changing clinical trials. Hi, Jill. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, Megan. Thank you for having me.
I worked in, clinical trials. We used to do an event in that space a long time ago, and patient recruitment was always, really the biggest challenge. And you would think people want to be, involved in these clinical trials and cutting edge research, but it is a tough and expensive part of the clinical trial research process for pharmaceutical companies and the hospitals that support them. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you got involved with AutoCruitment.
Sure, yeah, and you're absolutely right. The patient recruitment part of clinical trials is a really important one, and it's often one of the ones that has the most challenges. I've been in this space for 18 years now and spent most of my career at trying to solve the patient recruitment challenge in this issue. So I started at a company called Accurian that was focused on patient recruitment, and that organization was later bought by PPD, which is a CRO. And they started acquiring different site networks and formed accelerated enrollment solutions. So I was part of that organization for 14 years and sat in various leadership positions in accelerated enrollment solutions. So that, I got a really good understanding of the patient recruitment industry and what the needs are, as well as the site business, because the accelerated enrollment solutions at 160 global sites across the world. So I left there in 2021. I went to CVS Health. Was there for about 3 years. CVS Health was entering into clinical trials and was looking for some leaders who had experience in that space. So I was working there with their various businesses to develop solutions for pharma, utilizing their data. So I worked in patient recruitment and real world evidence while I was there. And then most recently, I joined AutoCruitment. I've been here for a year now as the CEO. AutoCruitment's a founder-run business or led business that's been around for about 10 years. And I was really excited to be able to join this organization and lead it through its next chapter. Having been in this space for so long and having worked on patient recruitment, I was really excited to see an organization that has really driven meaningful results in this space. Across that 10 years, we've worked in 120 different conditions across 700 studies, and we randomized over 13,000 people into clinical trials.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's, it's such an amazing area, and that's great. Tell me a little bit about kind of what is the technology platform? What makes AutoCruitment, different from some of the other solutions out there?
Sure. At AutoCruitment, we're really, really focused on going direct to patient. We find that one of the reasons why there's continues to be challenges in clinical trial enrollment is because the industry in general relies heavily on clinical trial sites to be able to find the patients. But at the end of the day, a very limited number of physicians actually participate in research. So the number of patients that ever get the opportunity to participate in a trial or even hear about a trial is very low. Only about 10% ever hear about clinical trials as an option to participate. So at AutoCruitment, we focus on that other 90% in developing strategies to reach that population, make them aware of clinical trials, and then help facilitate the handover in the process so that they get the opportunity to participate. So we have a technology platform that allows us to start with digital advertising to be able to reach that population. So we're able to reach a large audience of participants and make them aware of the opportunities that could be available to them. And then our technology platform tracks those patients and helps facilitate them through the process. There's multiple steps that happen from the time that they first respond to an ad to the time that they actually make it into the trial. And AutoCruitment is focused on that end-to-end process to make sure that we're finding the right patients that are both interested and motivated, but are also highly qualified for each clinical trial.
Oh, wow. What, I mean, when it comes to that, that challenge in terms of only a certain amount of physicians participating in clinical trials,
Right.
why is that? I mean, is it just the academic research centers and the docs that there, or is it broader than that? Is that something that can be solved for, or is it just sort of the nature of it?
Yeah, and I guess it's twofold. One is the barrier of entry for physicians to enter into trials is pretty high. There's a lot of organizations that try to assist with that make it easier for research naive physicians to participate. But the other reason is that when sponsors are running trials and they're designing the protocol, they're looking for physicians that are very experienced and have the expertise and the knowledge. So a lot of times they often go to the same physicians over and over again. So from my perspective, it's just not practical to really solve this problem holistically through the physicians. A lot of the areas that AutoCruitment's working in are conditions where patients are more and more looking for their own solutions and are online and they're researching the conditions. So even if they are working with a physician or have a relationship with a healthcare institution that does do research, a lot of times it's easier for them to find out about it on their own. So I think to really attack the problem is you can absolutely try to get more physicians interested, and that's needed, but to really, really drive meaningful results, you go direct to the patient who, is the most, motivated participant to really try to find different options for their healthcare.
Right. Well, in terms of that digital advertising, which of course has, evolved so much over the years in terms of pharma's ability to kind of communicate, create communities with patients, all of that. Tell me a little bit about, how AutoCruitment's approach to that space, is evolving, has changed, and is working in terms of matching quality patients to the trials.
Yeah. And I agree that there's been a lot of movement in that with pharma using digital advertising to reach patients, which is really encouraging to see. I would say over the last couple of years, it's become a lot more common for sponsors to proactively plan to have a digital advertising campaign included in their studies. So I think that's good. It's definitely more accepted now, and I think people are recognizing that it's a necessity. What we found at AutoCruitment, though, is it does take a lot of experience and expertise to really maximize the ROI that you're getting when you're placing these ads. It's unfortunately not as simple as just developing an ad and placing it on Facebook. It's a highly competitive space, and we find that with our extensive experience across so many studies and tracking all of those data metrics across all of those different campaigns, that we're really able to lean on that to be able to inform what is the most effective strategy to reach patients digitally. And we find that you really have to be working across multiple channels. You can't just be working on one platform. You have to be engaging and reaching out to patients in multiple ways online. And you also have to really have the flexibility to do a lot of test and learn around the messages, both the messages that you're using, but also what they look like, what the pictures, what the visuals are. And that's an area that we're constantly iterating and learning and trying to optimize how we're reaching patients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we used to have a thing where we would say, commonly everyone says it, fish where the fish are, go where the patients are, and give them that. Where are you finding that they are now more? I used to work at WebMD, so it was like, they would come there for healthcare. Now there's so many places for them to go for healthcare information online. What are some of the channels that are best for this?
Yeah, well, social media is absolutely still a primary channel that we rely on, and I think a lot of organizations rely on. But we also work with a lot of partners that do similar things like publishers. So like WebMD, like they may not be just on WebMD and like known healthcare websites, but they're absolutely out there on websites with different like healthcare blogs or any type of healthcare information. So there's ways that you can work with those organizations to be able to place ads there so that if they're doing a research article on like migraines, then you can put in, migraine ads there.
Right. And then in terms of, obviously we've talked a lot about the use and the application of AI and kind of the, getting to know patients, but also I imagine generative AI and the ability to have chatbots to screen and things like that. Are those things that you guys are doing? Do you use those applications at all?
Oh, it's absolutely something that was top of mind for us that we're starting to take advantage of. We are now in exploration phase of looking at how do we do that upfront in the advertising. It's something that a lot of other industries are taking full advantage of now. In clinical trials, we're a little bit more limited working within IRB approvals and everything. So we're going to start doing that probably very soon. But the one area I would add that we also focus a lot on is the advertising is just the first part and being able to find that population. Our organization spends a lot on time on making sure that we are honing that population in on the most qualified patients that are most motivated and appropriate for a trial. So we have multiple steps of pre-screening that we do before we hand a patient over. So the first step is they respond to our ad, but then they go through multiple stages to see if they are clinically qualified and appropriate for a protocol. So the first step is that they can do a self-reported questionnaire online with us. The second step is that we can follow up with a clinical phone screening where we rely on some of our medical staff to go in a little bit more depth to better understand if they're qualified. And then the third step is we have a new product called EMR Capture and Intelligence. And this is an area where we're relying on AI. So this is something we just released this year. It's available in the US. And what that is patients will give us that consent authorization to be able to get their medical records on their behalf, and our technology taps into the health information exchange to be able to get their longitudinal medical records. And then the technology partner we work with has AI that overlays that summarizes those records and puts it into a very user-friendly format for the sites to see. And it's all very, very fast. And where medical records are something the sites are going to get from the patients anyway. But what this is allowing us to do is it's allowing us to facilitate that much faster, get the patients into the sites, take that work off the sites. And then also it allows us to do that review before we even send the patients so that we're only sending the most qualified patients to the sites.
Right. And so I imagine that results in a lot of the timeline reductions that you're seeing around
Absolutely.
building those patients.
Yeah.
Are there any other key factors in that, or would you say that covers it?
Yeah, I mean, so making sure that we're sending as qualified patients as possible is probably one of the most critical things because the sites they're very, very busy. They're working on many studies. They're working with different partners. They don't always have the time to reach out to these referrals. So it really just improves that relationship with them and their engagement with the patients, the more qualified patients. So that's a real critical thing. But we also focus on the customer service aspect, I would say. So we have another service called engagement services. That's made up of two different teams. One team is focusing on the patients and the other team is focusing on the sites. And they're really there to facilitate all of the administrative and logistics to make sure that those patients are seen at the sites. The sites like it because depending on how many resources they have dedicated to the study, they appreciate the extra support for AutoCruitment to help schedule the patients or answering the patients' questions. And then the patients like it because clinical trials are usually very new for them. They have a lot of questions and they're not always able to get all the information from the site. So AutoCruitment can really act as an intermediary at that point to really help them get comfortable with the trial and get all of their questions answered.
Yeah. I mean, in my experience, I feel like that's a lot of where it breaks down, right? When
Yeah.
you get into, you want to be a participant in the clinical trial, but then that communication back and forth with the site about the questions, about the
Yeah.
appointments, about, all of that, where the sites are busy, as you said, they have lots of things they're managing. And, whether it's the coordinator, the clinical research coordinator on
Yeah.
site, managing all these patients with, cancellations and, it's never quite the priority as, your ear infection or whatever, whatever gets you to the doctor. So those
Yeah.
appointments get
Yeah.
canceled often
Yeah.
and it's a lot involved there.
Yeah.
So that's great. In terms of, other, KPIs, obviously timeline and getting the number of patients in. What are some
Mhm.
of the other, measures of success that you guys are looking at beyond some of the traditional recruitment KPIs?
Yeah, so our customers are the pharmaceutical companies, but we feel that we have secondary customers and we have other stakeholders that we're always measuring, and that's the patients and the sites. Ultimately, our mission is to be able to help patients get connected to clinical trials. So we're often measuring, how interested the patients are, how often they're responding to us, are we bringing value to them? Are they opting out of our messaging and everything? So they're absolutely an important stakeholder that we're always monitoring. And then the other one is the clinical research sites. At the end of the day, we're providing a service and a value to them, and we have to partner with them in order to be successful and bringing the patients into trials. So we've worked with over thousands of sites, and we're really pleased to see that a lot of sites think highly of AutoCruitment. A lot of our business actually comes from them referring us back to the pharmaceutical companies.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
That is always a great testament to the success of a program.
Yeah.
Around, one of the things that we talk about, for the last few years has been around equity and healthcare equity. And, we talked a lot about sort of lack of representation in clinical trials.
Yeah.
And I imagine that because you're sort of expanding that pool through digital advertising, through the, broader reach, that you have some ways to kind of ensure that there's a more diverse patient representation. Has that been a key factor
Yeah.
in the success?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important to us as well, especially with it being such a challenge in clinical trials where it is very biased population. So there's a lot of initiatives now and a lot of push to try to increase diversity in clinical trials. And so we are always making sure that our ads, our imagery, and our messaging is really being customized and tailored to different populations, around the unique needs that each population has, as well as what are their unique concerns and everything. So we do find by being able to go direct to patient and being able to customize who we're targeting and everything, we can be really effective in increasing diversity in clinical trials. A lot of times that's when customers are calling us when they really want us to help intentionally drive certain populations in their trials. So on average, about 48% across all of our trials are non-Caucasian, which we're really proud of because that's way higher than the industry average for clinical trials.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. And that, I mean, I think you were at CVS Health and, we saw a big uptick and a lot of interest, both from Walgreens and CVS
Yeah.
around, kind of building their teams around clinical trials and how they could get involved, which seemed to make logical sense. As so many things do in healthcare, it makes sense.
Right.
And then until you actually try, and it's much harder than it appears. But
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about, that experience and kind of any learnings that came out of that. Because I imagine it, there were some surprises
Yeah,
in how challenging.
I think that the biggest learning for me, and it was most eye-opening with my experience there, is really how interested and motivated and excited the patient community is about clinical trials. At CVS Health, we had a population of 130 million Americans that we were interacting with and trying to partner with trials. And so we would do a lot of surveys and research with that population to better understand whether, clinical trials was something that they wanted to participate in. And not surprisingly, most people would say they never even heard of a clinical trial. And this is even after the pandemic, where more people than average were starting to feel, understand clinical trials. But once they were educated on it and better learned more about the opportunity that it has for individuals to participate, there was a lot of interest. So that really just reinforced and emphasized, my passion for trying to develop solutions to help a wider community get access to clinical trials.
Mhm. Yeah, it is interesting how it's, when you think about the traditional problems or the traditional challenges of why patient recruitment is hard, so much of it is education, access, the understanding. Then
Yeah.
there's a trust element. And I think certainly at the time, and I've heard this, CVS is one of the most trusted
Right.
brands
Yeah.
in healthcare, right?
Yeah.
So that, access to education through organizations like that, but also to your point, where they are, and for better or for worse, people trust the internet at this point. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but, getting them that education and then getting them the access to the physicians who are doing the research is so important. What about, we talked a little bit about AI, and I think that, that ability to both screen patients, using that,
Yep.
but also even with the tools to kind of have conversations with them, to educate them. Are there any other, innovations that you see, maybe not even just for clinical trial recruitment, but within healthcare, that you think will really kind of accelerate this and help people get more involved in the clinical trials that they should
Yeah.
be involved in?
So technology, as I share, is a must for us with AutoCruitment. I'm actually kind of blown away at how many organizations don't rely on technology to track the success and what's happening in their recruitment campaigns. So we track every single step along the way, from the time that a person responds to the ad to the time that they are entered into the trial. So that's an area that we're constantly investing in and trying to find ways to optimize all of the steps. There's still a lot of inefficiency in the process. So we're looking at ways that we can lean on technology to really help shorten those time periods that patients are waiting to get through each step, coordinating the communications that we're having with the patients, that the sites are having with the patients. So there's still a lot of opportunity to invest in improvements there. And then the other areas that we're looking at is how do we better extend the value that we have in being able to engage patients directly and being able to interact with them and get their medical records. If you think about just research in general and all healthcare research in general, not just clinical trials, I'm always I'm very disheartened and at the fact that we have so many different improvements in AI and technology, but we can't really take advantage of it with healthcare data because it's in silos because of privacy and HIPAA regulations. So the way you can really open that up is, the only person that can really open that up is the patients themselves. And, what I've learned in my experience at CVS and AutoCruitment is patients are very motivated to participate in that. So we're thinking about how do we put them at the center of the research? How do we help them enable the access to their data so that can help with clinical trial participation, but also, research in general?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is, and I always think about this, having worked, on the pharma side, and the payer side, and the provider side, that you have, these silos, these stakeholders, the data lives in different forms in all of these organizations, and then, without connecting it in some way, we lose so much, right?
Right.
And of course, patient privacy is incredibly important, but when it comes down to, when you're sick, what you care about is your doctors and getting the best medicine, and how that happens, not so much,
Yeah.
the privacy part of it. So it's such a, it's a rock and a hard place for sure, and it continues to be there. But I do see, sort of glimmers of hope, but also that need for the collaboration. And that's what we talk about a lot at Health Impact in terms of that
Yeah.
collaboration between providers and pharma, and the patient. And as you said, if
Yeah.
you put the patient at the center, then that's all where, then it can all work,
That's very easy. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and a little, you talked a little bit about HIPAA and compliance around that. And you guys do also, I mean, you work, I imagine, internationally as well. So,
Yes, yes. We have capabilities in 50 countries, but we have a proven experience in 37.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I think, you know, when, we always like to talk about kind of if you could change anything. And sometimes, I don't know if we've just answered that question, but
Yeah.
when you think about kind of what in healthcare could change that would make, it better for the patients to get better access to clinical trials so that they can get that research and move that research forward.
Yeah.
What comes to mind?
Yeah. I think about, I've seen in my experience, and as we're talking here, that by enabling that patient, putting them at the center and going direct to patient, you can see some really impactful results. Not only is it really beneficial to the patients, but you can see real meaningful results in the clinical trials where we've been able to cut timelines in half, which is pretty significant cost savings that go into that. So I really wish and would love to see how can we as an industry really change the way we're thinking about budgeting and feasibility and study planning so that from the very beginning, when you're starting, like from the very beginning to figure out exactly how you're going to conduct this trial and run this trial, if you design it around the fact that you want to do a direct to patient strategy, as opposed to always making it an add-on or a rescue solution, you can really run the trial more efficiently and take advantage of some of these strategies that are allowing more patients to participate in research.
Yeah. And enable that, sort of real world evidence to actually be used, right? I mean,
Yes,
I think,
absolutely.
it still lives in my head as a bit of a buzzword, the real world evidence,
Mhm.
because I just feel like we're not even allowed to use it. Right? So to get to that place where we can, and, we talk to a lot of digital health companies who struggle with this, trying to do trials, trying to do research, but it is so expensive. So, that
Yeah.
around that budget and how you can cut costs and, ensure that the patients that you need the most are who both need the solution the most or the treatment the most, are actively participating and engaged, so
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And then we always talk about good things. So tell me about, is there something, that you guys are working on or just in general in healthcare that you're super excited about?
Yeah, I think so with we're working on clinical trials, but we're also a digital advertising company. So I get really, really excited about a lot of the advancements in digital advertising. So there's just so many different ways and more efficient ways that you can target and reach populations. We're looking at a lot of other industries now, like retail and banking, and some of the advancements they've made in their advertising to really learn from that and think about how can we better place ads in front of patients to make it more more tailored to them and more relevant to them. So that's some of the stuff I personally get excited about, and really looking forward to being able to drive some of that and bring some of that innovation to clinical trials.
Yeah, it is. I mean, pharmaceutical advertising in general is such an interesting thing. I mean, obviously we all sit and we see the, TV commercials that are still, and there's, of the advertisers, they're still using everything, right?
Yeah.
TV, print,
Mhm.
you know, radio, banners, everything. And certainly for patient recruitment, and ultimately it's because it works, but
Mhm.
it's an interesting area as you can get, more targeted and reach the people who need it most.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jill. It's been a pleasure meeting you and learning about AutoCruitment and the great work that you guys are doing. So, thanks
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes our conversation about clinical trial recruitment. And AutoCruitment's data-driven approach demonstrates how AI and targeted digital engagement can dramatically improve trial efficiency and patient access. For more insights and on healthcare innovation, subscribe to Digital Health Talks and visit healthimpactlive.com. This is Megan Antonelli signing off. Thanks for listening, and join us next week as we continue exploring technology's role in advancing healthcare delivery.